Let's go ahead and get started with James. Little preface here. The Epistle of James is marked by the austere features of the church in Jerusalem, which was affected or largely unaffected by the wider contact with the Gentile world. They seem to be a little more xenophobic and a little more hung up on their Old Testament or their Jewish traditions. It was harder for Gentiles to be a part of the church in Jerusalem, it seems. And obviously with the Jewish population being what it is, that being the center of the Jewish world, you know, they were a little bit more less diverse, you might say. By which the life and teachings of St. Paul were so powerfully influenced. Like we have been studying, especially in the book of Ephesians, a lot of the message in Ephesians is Paul writing epistles that he's saying, hey, look, you know, you're all equal in Christ now. You're all equal in the new covenant. There's no distinction between poor and rich, Jew or Gentile. You're all equal. You're all the same. James is encouraging his brethren to exhibit patience and develop this trait even to the breaking point. And especially in chapter 1, it deals largely with patience. God is developing our character. There are 3 urgent requirements for us all, at least in chapter 1. There is one is wisdom to act and speak wisely in the hour of trial, which is probably a big one for a lot of us. I know it's a big one for me. Faith that refuses to respond to the surging storms that gather in your life, the surging storms of doubt. And James talks about the faith that responds accordingly in this book, and also humility and contentment with God's dealings. That's also probably another big one for a lot of us, because you know, we're all in control, or we think we are, or want to be in control of our own life. And then when things come up, throws a monkey wrench into that. Verse 1, we'll just go ahead and start off with verse 1 here. James chapter 1. James, a servant of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes in the dispersion, greetings. And this is being written to the church in Jerusalem. One thing I noticed in verse 1, James kind of gives the standard greeting that Paul gives in a lot of his epistles. He calls himself a bondservant or a prisoner of Christ. Does anybody remember who James was? Brother of Jesus, yeah. So it's kind of odd to me that he delivers the same kind of Paulic greeting in this, instead of saying, hey, you know, I'm James, brother of Jesus. You need to listen to me. I know what's going on. You know, a lot of us would take that and use that cloud. I would. I'd totally name drop. I do it all the time. You know, you guys, I've told you how I do at the clinic. You know, I just walk around to random patients. Hey, you know, my wife's the chief here, right? You know, okay. Be nice to me. My wife runs this. I don't. But, yeah, I mean. I use her too. Okay, good. I tell these airmen, I said, hey, yeah, but if you did, yeah, I tell these airmen all the time. I met one yesterday morning. I'm like, hey, yeah, if you're ever in the clinic, ask for my wife. She'll square you away if you need any help with anything. Met an airman yesterday on White Sands. I went out yesterday morning, and I drove by White Sands, and his car was smoking. It looked like it was on fire. He was pouring, not dripping, he was pouring transmission fluid out of the bottom of his car and everything. So anyway, found out. I stopped by to see if he needed help. Found out he was a young staff sergeant out there on base. So we had an eventful morning yesterday morning. So, but anyway, you know, Paul gives this James gives this standard greeting. He doesn't name drop, and he uses the preferred or modest title of servant or bondservant. Anyone have any question on the second part of that verse when it talks about the dispersion? If you've never thought about it or read it, you're probably pretty spot on with what you're thinking. All it's talking about is the dispersion after the start of Christianity, the dispersion of persecution. People generally left to go to various parts of the empire, whether it be Asia Minor or Egypt or wherever, to escape persecution. not only from the Roman Empire, but also largely from the Jews in Jerusalem, because we know how that played out for Christ. He was executed by the Romans technically, but it was actually the Jews that did all the work. They wanted him gone. He was an inconvenience. So that's all that's talking about. We do know that historically speaking, Christianity was not the religion of the empire until about 313 AD, when Constantine the Great of the Eastern Roman Empire basically established Christianity as the empire's religion. So there was a lot of persecution. We hear about Christians being thrown to the lions, things like that. Anyway, standard greeting talks about the dispersion. It's just the scattering of Christians. Anyone want to read verses 2 through 4?
Consider it all joy, my brethren, when you encounter various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces endurance, and let endurance have its perfect result, so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing.
One thing that we want to talk about here before we really get into the chapter is the word patience that we see in this text. The word patience, translated from the Greek, is a Greek word, hupomon. And what that means, I've done a lot of research on it, looking around. Patience is one of those words that we hear in the New Testament that it kind of fits, we know what it means, but it's a little out of context at the same time. When it talks about letting patience have its perfect work, things like that. One thing you need to realize that from the Greek, the word hupomon, the word for patience, is basically a word describes active endurance, more than the passive waiting as we think of when we hear the word patience. The ancient Greek word hupomon comes from hupo, or under, and meno, to mean stay, abide, or remain. At its root, it means to remain under. So hupomon, aka patience in the Greek, means to stay under and remain in place, remain under. It has the picture of someone under a heavy load and choosing to stay there instead of trying to escape. That's what the word in its original context meant. So when we hear the word patience, it doesn't quite fit. We kind of know what it means, but if you realize that the word means more endurance or steadfastness is the more literal translation, then it kind of makes more sense. With this analogy, the word hupomon meaning being under and remaining under, in the Christian sense, maybe you could think of a good example would be missionaries. Missionaries, their patience, their endurance, their steadfastness is exhibited by the fact that a lot of times they're in very tumultuous, very hard circumstances. But what do? They're not trying to escape that circumstance. They remain under that circumstance, within that circumstance, for the glory of God to evangelize people. So that's a pretty decent analogy of the term. The philosopher Philo called hupomon the queen of virtues. The Greek commentator Oesterle said that the word patience described the frame of mind which endures. So when we're going through James 1, it makes a lot more sense to us, and it seems to flow better if we don't think of the word patience as how we think of it today. As if we think of the word patience in here as more endurance or steadfastness, it makes more sense. In my version, the ESV, it actually uses the word steadfastness. It doesn't use the word patience. So that makes it a little bit easier to understand when you're reading. In that section as well, the text, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, quote unquote, endurance. Faith is tested through trials, not produced through trials. I think that's one thing that James wants to get across here in the book of James. Trials reveal what faith we do have, not because God doesn't know how much faith we have, but so that our faith will be evident to ourselves and to those around us. To me, that's a very important point in the text. Maybe we don't think about it a lot, but to me it's vital as a Christian, as a New Testament Christian. And we talk about it all the time. Why do we come to church on Sundays? Why do we show up here every Sunday?
We're commanded and meet together once a week.
Yep, we're commanded. We show up to worship on the first day of the week. But on a more selfish note, I know, and I can probably speak for a lot of us in here, we also show up because we want to be with, as Rachel says, like-minded people. When we're at work during the week and dealing with the trouble and the turmoil and the storms of everyday life, it's hard. I show up selfishly so I can be with people that think the same way that I do and want the same things that I want. I show up to see Becky and Chad and Monique and even Chris, so I show up to be with people that encourage me through their faith. Otherwise, why would we? It would be really tough to come every Sunday if that weren't the case. For me, it would anyway.
Hey, Keith,
Yeah.
I think one thing that is often looked over is in verse 2, the first little part of that statement. It tells us how we should approach the trials. That I don't know what the ESV is, but in the NASB it says consider it all joy. So your trials should be approached with open and excitement and happiness, although they may be difficult. Your attitude towards it is very clearly defined for us.
Yeah, and we're going to get into that here in some later. I'm jumping around a little bit, trying to cover. There's actually a lot to unpack in James chapter 1. If you really want to get into it, there's a lot to go through. But yeah, you're absolutely right, and we'll address that here in a little bit. But yeah, that's a key thing for me, and it should be for a lot of people. You come to worship to be with people that encourage you and inspire you through their faith. James is a book that talks a lot about faith, and you guys know how I am when it comes to faith and works, and James is the book that addresses that. So, it's very vital to me. It's a very important section, very important practice to implement in our lives is to be with people that have faith, that encourage us to have faith. I mentioned it in a sermon a couple weeks ago. Faith is a very personal thing, It's easy to tell somebody, you're going through trials. Well, Kathy, yeah, there's wildfires. Just have some faith. I mean, it's easy for me to say that, but I can't have faith for Kathy. I can't have faith for Chris. Chris can't have faith for me. It's a very personal thing. And James addresses that, and he tries to encourage Christians. Life is hard, and I'm sure life was hard in the first century for different reasons. But life is very hard, and sometimes we lose track, of our faith. Let me ask you this. Faith is tested through trials, not produced by trials. Trials reveal what faith we do have, not because God doesn't know how much faith we have, but so that our faith will be evident to ourselves and those around us. Let me ask you this. Why is our faith tested? Why? What's one reason? What's probably the main reason our faith is tested? I see you thinking over there. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, it'd be pretty easy to be a believer if nothing bad ever occurred. There's only goodness and sunshine.
Sure would be nice, wouldn't it? Sure would be nice. Yeah. I mentioned in the sermon a few weeks back, our faith is built on Christ. He's the cornerstone of our faith and our foundation of our faith. Faith is the cornerstone of being a Christian. If the devil can destroy your faith, then what else does he need to do? What else does Satan need to do to you if he's destroyed your faith? Nothing. Faith is everything for a Christian. If he can destroy that, then he can destroy everything. You know, maybe a sports analogy. You know, if your starting pitcher gets hurt in baseball, you just bring in another pitcher. You know, in a spiritual aspect, in a spiritual parallel, there's no starting pitch, there's no backup to bring in. If you don't have faith, then you don't have anything. And if that can be destroyed, then everything is gone after that. We've probably seen people in our own lives. There's probably been times in our own lives as well that our faith has been tested. We've lost faith and maybe come back to the church. I've been in that boat. You know, I was thinking this morning when I was studying, the preacher that baptized me, we were kind of in between preachers back when I was young. I was probably like 13 or so. And we were in between preachers. We had a guy, local preacher. He came in for a month or two until we got into the preacher. And he baptized me. You know, not long after that, he had left the church. His life was destroyed. He had become an alcoholic and everything else. I think on a brighter note, he had gone back to the church in the end. But he had some things in his life that just destroyed his faith. And you're thinking, man, you're a preacher. How can that happen? He's a human being. He's a human, you know?
Well, if Satan can do one thing to steer you away from God, that's all he needs to do.
Yeah.
He doesn't need to keep after you and
Yeah.
keep haranguing you. His mission is accomplished, and he moves on to something else.
Yeah, on to the next one.
You're nothing for him to worry about anymore. You're his.
Yeah, on to the next victim.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and so many things can destroy our faith, you know, and it shouldn't, but it does. Again, because we're human, I guess. You know, the loss of a spouse, you know, can just utterly destroy a Christian's faith. It shouldn't. It should be a, you know, in the spiritual sense, a celebration, you know, but a lot of times it's not, you know, and some people, they go into depression. They never recover from that. Financial problems. Everybody knows. Speaking of the choir right now, man, inflation's off the charts. It's only going to get worse. Gas prices are just astronomical, you know. Economic problems can destroy faith, you know, because it puts you in a depression in a hole that you don't think you can get out of. You're not looking past, you know, the current problem. You're not keeping your eyes focused on the prize, the end of the race, so to speak. So many things can destroy faith. Even little things can mount up over time. Whatever those things might be. It's different things for different people. Money can be an issue for some Christians. You know, I like to watch YouTube. Well, it depends on what I'm watching on YouTube. I might, you know, start going down a rabbit hole and find some videos that question, you know, that make me start questioning my faith in God, you know. It can be anything for anybody, but unfortunately that does happen. And I guess it's a sign of spiritual immaturity. And again, that's, you know, we'll address that. It's easy for me to say that, but, you know, we all have to live with it to one degree or the other. Faith is tested because if it's destroyed, nothing remains. So trials don't produce faith, then what does produce faith? Romans 10:17, that faith cometh by hearing and hearing by the word of God. You know, when I had heard that growing up, even as in the church, I always just thought that's just a platitude. That's just a catchphrase. Doesn't really mean anything. But the more I studied, the more I thought about it, I think that really does mean something. You know, when we're out evangelizing, we're going to come across people that are atheists or, well, let's not use atheists as an example. Let's talk about people that aren't going to church, but they're generally good people. They just, you know, I believe in God. I just don't go to church. You know, that one verse in the Bible actually encompasses a lot more than we think. Because would you argue that we're inherently disobedient by nature to God? Yeah.
I think maybe nature would be somewhat rebellious.
Yeah, I think we're inherently disobedient toward God, human nature-wise. But at the same time, even through our disobedience, almost all people, the vast majority of people recognize or believe in God or a God, whether it be a Hindu God or a Muslim God or a Christian God. The vast majority of people that you talk to say you're trying to get them to come to church. Well, I don't go to church. I believe in God. They'll tell you that right up front. I believe in God. I just don't go to church. I think that verse, Romans 10:17, really kind of hits on that inner being, that inner quality that we all possess as human beings, that we do believe in a higher power. We do believe in a God. And hearing the Word of God can produce faith in us. It can awaken our spirit. It can awaken the Holy Spirit within us and produce desired results. When we hear the Word of God, it does produce a reaction in us. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's positive, but will produce a reaction. Go ahead.
I just want to say this kind of ties back into our last session where we talked about the little blue truck
Oh, yeah, little blue truck.
and how we sort of get caught up in all our important items. For some people, it's like, well, I believe, so that should be enough.
Yeah.
I've done my part.
Yeah.
Now I just got to stick with it.
Well, even the demons believe, Belief and having a belief and having a faith are two totally different things, And James is a book that talks about that, and this is kind of my thing, it's my soapbox. Anyone can say they believe, but if they, your faith is what's going to cause you to act. I believe in a lot of things, but I don't have enough faith to go chasing those things. I don't have enough faith that's going to cause me to act on those things. And that's the big difference, the big key between belief and faith as a Christian. Don't tell me you have belief. Tell me you have faith and show me that faith.
Well, I think too, the one struggle that is evident in society today is that we use this word belief and we use it as this all-encompassing thing. But in reality, the people who do not act on the belief only believe in a small percentage of what they've read and heard.
Yeah.
Because if they actually believed and they understood what they believed, there's no way they wouldn't act.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing in the Bible that suggests that you can believe and sit on the sidelines and just let everything pass by. It does not say that.
Be a milquetoast fence sitter. Yeah.
Well, clearly, these people, I personally hear a lot non-Christians, if you will. Well, I have faith and I pray, but church is not for me. Well, clearly, these people have not read the Word of God. I guess it's better for them to pray than not pray, but how often are they actually praying?
Yeah.
Is it when they need something?
When they need something. Yeah.
Run into something hard? Do they have a great week and do they actually thank God for that? Or do they wait and pray when, the world's coming to them?
Yeah.
Well, and the interesting thing about what you said there is, I'm going to speak about this in the sermon. There is again, it's these general statements that are so dangerous for people in general, right? We use the word church, and we make it interchangeable with a building with a whole bunch of people in it, and we define that as what church is. And for some, I would completely agree. If that's what your definition of church is and that's your reality, I wouldn't want to be any part of that either.
Right.
But the gap there is, sure, you can have faith and you can pray, but if you have belief, then your responsibility is to study. If you study, you understand that is not what church is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? The church is a completely different beast, and there is no way that you would want to not be included in a church that is driven by the truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So it's just those general statements that are so dangerous, and even like, oh, I believe, but I'm just not a church guy, like you said. It just leads me to wonder, okay, how much do you actually believe?
Yeah.
And how much do you actually understand? And that's maybe where we, as a Church of Christ, have failed, because, belief is one thing, but a knowledge of what they believe has to be understood. You need to really clarify that.
Yeah. I updated the church website this week. I update it every week, but I changed part of the main page, the welcome page, and we had a Bible verse in there, but I changed it to just a little, come visit the Church of Christ in La Luz, and I just put on there, hey, do yourself a favor and make that 15-minute drive. Come see what this congregation has to offer. and me and Chad were talking about it outside. The website's getting hits. People are seeing the website. But the downside to that, and we all know how people are, and we can be this way as well. They see the outside of the building, they're like, oh man, look at this place. That's barely even a church, man. I got a church, Christ Community up on the hill. They got that big nice sign up there and got the band playing, There's more going on here than what's on the exterior of the building. And, we want to try to convey that and encourage people to, come check it out one time. Just check it out, see what we have to offer here. And we've talked about it before. One thing about this congregation, it's a lot different than any congregation I've ever been to as far as the atmosphere and the attitude and the camaraderie and the love that's displayed here. So, it's hard to get people in the doors sometimes because people have a view of church. I'm going to church. This is where I go to be judged, and this is where I go to hang out with hypocrites. And it's tough, man. It's tough. It's tough hanging out with Christians sometimes because we're all broken people to one degree or the other. That's why we're here. We're trying to get better, but, sometimes we fail at it. Unfortunately, it causes problems in the church. People outside of the church experience those. They don't want to go back. It's totally understandable. So,
I was going to say, to that degree, just from being a kid growing up and interacting with my peers, the biggest issue I see in people not going to the church and not believing in general is that sense of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
I have so many friends who stop believing. I could list some of them right now, but I'm not going to, of course. The biggest issue they see is they'll go with their parents, they'll go with their family. Their family might be good people, but the people they interact with at the church just don't do what they preach, and it jades them so quickly. Why would I go somewhere where people want to talk down to me and they only,
Yeah, when people decide, maybe they get the Holy Spirit starting to move within them, they're like, I'm going to go to church today. And then they go and they have a bad experience. They're never coming back. They're never coming back, and that's on us, So that's always, something to be cognizant of, and I think we are. We do the best we can here. And that's all you can do. But we have a very welcoming atmosphere here, loving atmosphere. So that's important. But getting into the next section, it's kind of what Chris brought up. We're going to start getting into that. So we see that trials do not produce faith, but when they are greeted with faith, it can produce endurance and patience. Conversely, trials do not always produce patience and endurance. If trials are greeted with unbelief and grumbling, then bitterness and resentment can occur. This is why James wants us to count it all joy when we experience trials. This is faith's response to trials. This is asking a lot from us, though, isn't it? As human beings, it's asking a lot from us. Day-to-day life, financial problems like we've already talked about, your car breaks down, it's a lot on you, and it's hard to keep the faith. Imagine, hypothetically speaking, let's say Gabriel decided to be a Christian today and be baptized, and he's got the Spirit moving within him, man. He's going out this week. He's ready to conquer the world. He's driving to work, and his car blows up. It's hard to keep the faith, right? I mean, you just started down that walk, and I've already got financial problems. I ain't got no way to get to work, It's hard. It's hard to keep the faith. But why is your faith being attacked? Why are you being attacked?
Well, for me especially, it's like finally coming back after such a long time of not being there. Do you really mean it?
Well,
Satan's there.
yeah. Satan's there. Hell, man, this guy's going back to church. No, can't have that. Yeah, I got a little something for you. Bam, But yeah, I mean, we're going to be attacked, especially as Christians, when you're living a godly life or trying. That's when Satan wants to get his claws in you because he's already got everybody else. He's already got the people outside the doors. Now he wants you. So, and it's hard to have faith when those kind of things happen as Christians. And that's kind of a maturity issue as a Christian, As a young Christian, you don't expect a young Christian to fully understand that. But someone that's been in the church 30 or 40 years, they should have a more developed faith at that point. They should understand that, hey, trials are going to happen because of who I am and what I believe in. And they're going to come. And how I address those trials is the key. It's how we address them. It's not to say that you're never going to be down, but you have to keep your eyes at the end of the race. You have to keep your eyes on the final goal. Hey, this is a setback. It's okay. It's going to be okay because I've got God. It may not work out like I think it will. It may cause me a little pain, but I've got faith. It's going to be all right in the end.
There's a higher level of story to this as well. It probably isn't worth getting into the in-depths of it, but there's a reason why the apostles gave up everything when they followed Jesus.
Yeah.
There's a reason. There's a reason for that. And that's so that you do not have the distractions of your worldly possessions, right? Because temptations are us falling into our own lusts, whatever that is.
Mm-hmm.
It's something earthly, something of a physical want. It could be something in your mind. There's tons of things that create temptation. But the important thing to realize is it's your temptation. It's your lust that is causing that.
Mm-hmm.
And that is because you lived in the world before, and now you have to turn away from
Mm-hmm.
it. So it is very difficult. We were talking about this.
Yep.
Endurance, right? The path that you're walking down it's not easy because you're still walking through the world that you just gave up everything in.
Mm-hmm.
So you're looking at all these things that you used to enjoy and were fun and made you happy, at least you thought they did. And something bad happens, like your car blows up, you start spitting out transmission fluid and having oil all over the place. Yeah, it's very easy to then go and start looking, you're surrounded by these other things and just say, what's it for? Why do this? Because unfortunately, we don't get to reap the benefits that were promised until we've completed the journey.
Yeah.
Right? And that's a hard pill to swallow.
It's
when you
tough.
have Dr. Pepper's sitting right next to you that you want to partake in. You know what I mean?
It's tough. It's tough to have that discipline or that faith to keep your eye on the prize, because the prize is way down the road. Hopefully you're not seeing the prize, tomorrow or whatever. God doesn't take you, but it's tough.
But that's a reason you have to stay on the course because you don't know.
Right. You have to keep the faith, and you have to grow as a Christian and say, hey, this is a temporary setback. This is a trial. It's going to be okay. Go ahead, Gabriel.
Go ahead.
It's all good. We'll all get a comments in.
I was just going to say, to the degree of what Chris was saying, pretty much the reason why I initially lost my faith is just seeing all the terrible things in the world. You read about it and you think, how can someone let this happen? And now that I've grown and matured, of course, I realize it's not just God allowing that to happen. There's all sorts of evils in the world that cause that. I can't just attribute that to this one figure. And now I'm on my sort of path to
Trying to figure it all out.
Trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, just doing the best you can.
see if I can make sense of it. And of course, that journey's going to take me a while, but I hope I can.
Yeah. And like Chris alluded to, there's a lot of things that keep us from being faithful. A lot of things in the world. Talked about it Wednesday night. What did Lot's wife do? Oh man, let me just check out what's going on back. Man, I left my pots and pans back there. Boom, turned into a pillar of salt. Why? Just because she looked back? You alluded to it. It was why she looked back.
Why?
Yeah. Missed that stuff, man. Missed those possessions. Rich young ruler, what happened to him? Came to Jesus, saw the power of the gospel. He's like, hey, or the power of Christ's teachings. It's like, man, I got to have that. Hey, what do I need to do to get this, And I got to imagine when I'm reading that text, I'm thinking there's ulterior motives there. Maybe there's not, but I'm like, and Christ tells him, hey, give up all you own. Come follow me. What happens? He turns around, goes away sad. Can't do it. Can't do it.
And I love hearing Gabriel's perspective on this because it's a challenging thing to get this point across, because we have this world that is so dark and so much is happening.
But we love it.
Not only do we love it, we love the opportunities it gives us, right?
Mm-hmm.
But so often God's the one that's blamed.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yep.
God lets this happen. He doesn't let it happen. I think James talks about it actually in chapter 1 somewhere, where the thing, God does not allow, he cannot allow evil to happen because he is perfect and good. The devil is the cause of all evil. And the evil that creates, and the reason why we have darkness in the world, is because it's ran by men. And men have pride, they have egos, they want, they want to be like God, so they do things to become like God. And then that is what causes all the negative things that happen.
Who does the Bible say the master of this world is? Satan. Yeah. Satan runs this part of it. So, Chad, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Go ahead.
Well,
we're all good. We'll get there eventually. No, it's all right.
I wanted to talk about obstacles and then priorities as Christians and people in the world. It's easy we were talking about, the car blows up, the first week you're going back to church, whatever. Do people do that in other aspects of their life? Meaning your job, right? You have bad days, everybody is short-handed, understaffed, you have inflation. Do you hit your first bump and just quit your job? No.
It's so easy to throw religion away, though. Throw God away.
It seems to be the first thing to go. Whether, people are, I'm busy at work, I'm guilty of that. We all are. I've got stuff to do on my house, and I've got this, that, and that. And not attending church for reasons like that is just unacceptable.
Yeah.
That's an interesting concept too, because to me that's an evidence of where your priorities, like you're saying.
Exactly.
It's you are interested in status, right? And work gives you the ability to meet that status, right? Without work, you don't get the money to then go fix or buy or whatever you have that you need, right? What I see is whenever you have a debt, like something happens at work or something like that, and you get a little frustrated, you replace church with a bucket of ice cream, right? Instead of praying to God, you go say, I'm going to get my head in full of Cosmopolitan ice cream and eat that entire bucket. That's what happens. God gets replaced, and it gets replaced quickly.
Cosmopolitan. Neapolitan.
That's right.
Same thing.
I bet Cosmopolitan magazine.
I wasn't going to say anything, but then I saw Rachel laughing, so I was like, all right, yeah, I didn't know if I was the only one that heard that or what.
Yeah, so the point is, though, that it's so easy whenever we get frustrated with the things of the world, we replace them with things of the world. Right? Instead of going, like, something frustrated me in the world, let me go talk to something that's going to be a more valuable replacement, which is praying, studying, the long game versus the short game.
Yeah. It's hard to keep your eye on the long game because we live in a microwave society. We've talked about it before. Everything is here and now. I want something, Amazon right here at the tip of my fingers, Walmart delivery. I want groceries, don't even have to go get them. It's hard. It's hard to keep your eyes on the prize.
Could I say something?
Yeah.
I think it also comes with the state of the culture that is America now. You can look at a lot of Middle Eastern countries, and they still are very well versed in sort of that spirituality. They practice that, and the culture and the people are that. But in America, it's because it's such a melting pot, you can't have that. And as a result, we have such disparate views, and people who are just focused on we're not Christian or just any form, just give. So.
Yeah, there's a lot of different aspects to it. I think our culture is supposed to be secular first, but a country built on the principles of Christianity and Judaism. But it's secular first. The secular side tends to always win. What am I saying? Diversity of people has a lot to do with it, but a lot of it, to me, a lot of it's our culture. Things are so easy in this country now. Nobody needs God or anything because they have everything. It's not like that in a lot of places in the world, where religion is still a big deal to people, or faith or spirituality or whatever religion they're following. I mean, But getting back to it, Let patience or endurance, steadfastness, have its full effect so that you may be perfect and complete, lacking in nothing. And I think general application here is he's just saying, let trials, let obstacles affect your faith and your patience and endurance and your steadfastness in a positive way so that you can be full and complete in the end. It's not a 400 meter. It's a marathon. You're on a marathon. It's going to be a constant growing process as a Christian, and you're going to have roadblocks. You're going to have stumbling blocks placed in your path, but take it with the attitude, the proper attitude, and then it should be easier for you. So what does it mean to let patience or endurance or steadfastness have its perfect work? Faithful endurance is the end goal, kind of what we just mentioned. Perfection, completeness, wholeness. Endurance makes us spiritually mature. Notice, and then one thing we want to keep this in mind when we're going through James, notice that it's not the suffering that produces maturity. The suffering doesn't produce maturity. If anything, it produces the exact opposite. It's the act of endurance, or as the Bible in the King James, if you have that, it's probably saying patience. It's the act of endurance. The believer is commanded to let patience have its perfect work, which shows that our response matters. Consistency in life, even in the face of trials, is what produces Christian maturity, not the suffering. It's how we address the suffering. Our attitude toward that suffering is how we're going to grow as Christians. We're all going to suffer. People that don't go to church suffer, but they don't have any hope. If they don't change their life, there's no hope at the end of their suffering. There's hope at the end of ours. Anyone want to read verses 5 through 8?
If any of you lacks wisdom, let him ask God, who gives generously to all without reproach, and it will be given him. But let him ask in faith, with no doubting, for the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea that is driven and tossed by the wind. For that person must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord. He is a double-minded man, unstable in all his ways.
A lot to unpack here if you really want to get into it, but there's some real critical application in these verses, I think, as well. In trials, we need wisdom a lot more than we need knowledge. Knowledge is the raw information, but wisdom is the ability or you know how to use that raw information. Someone once said that knowledge is the ability to take things apart. Wisdom is the ability to put things back together. And we all know the difference between knowledge and wisdom. We see it in our everyday lives. I've referred to people in the world, and you've probably heard me use this term, and you've probably known these people. There is a term, it's an actual term, it's called educated idiot. These people are highly educated. They've lived in the world of academia all their lives. They have all the degrees. Can barely pump their own gas. They have no real world application. They have knowledge, but they don't have wisdom. We can look at family members growing up. I mean, I grew up largely the way that Becky and Rachel did, and maybe Kathy, I don't know, but and probably Chad. I saw a lot of wisdom from the people that I was associated with, like say my grandfather, elders in the church, deacons, people that uncles, aunts. Maybe not a lot of knowledge, but a lot of wisdom. My grandfather was a very wise man to be someone that I think only made it to the 9th grade. His father had died young, so he was essentially the man of the house at 15 years old. You know, had a lot of wisdom though, had a lot of real world application. Maybe not a lot of book learning. We can get deeper into this. Talking about verses 5 through 8. If you lack wisdom, ask God, who gives generously and to all without reproach. God is not a respecter of persons, and He's not giving begrudgingly. He gives graciously to all, and it will be given to, or asking it will be given to him. Let him ask in faith with no doubting. That's a big one. That's a big one, and you could do a sermon or a Bible study on this, and you could talk all day on it. I can tell you in personal experience right now. I'll just tell you what I'm going through right now. I'm trying to get better at it. I'm trying to be more spiritually mature. But one thing that's really been bothering me, and I've talked to Chris and Chad about it, I'm sure it's on all of our minds to a degree, is this situation right here, this congregation, this church. I do not want to be in 2 years where this place was 2 years ago. I want this place to grow. I've been struggling with that in my prayers. At the end of the day, I do have faith that it will grow. But I guess my problem is why am I asking? Am I asking for me or am I asking for God? And I think sometimes I'm asking for me. And I have to evaluate myself when I pray. Am I asking with faith or am I just hoping God's going to do it for us? You know, I did a sermon a couple of months back and I talked about the church in Lexington, Kentucky, or Louisville, Kentucky, I believe, that Southeastern church, where they had what they called BAGS, BHAGS, big audacious, hairy goals. And one of the things with these goals was faith-based goals, things that they wanted to accomplish that they were numerically and financially incapable of, but things that they knew that they could still accomplish if God's hand was in the picture. And that's something that we need to keep in mind as Christians. Even with this congregation, there are some positives about this congregation. There are some things working against us. You know, location, being in La Luz, things like that. None of that matters if God's hand is at work. And we need to keep that in mind. You know, I get down sometimes, man, I'm praying, man, we need growth, you know, we don't want the church to die here. And then I think, you know, I need to have more faith. And I need to stop asking for me. I need to start asking for God. It's what He wants and His will be done, not mine. So, you know, am I a double-minded man? Sometimes I think so. Struggle, you know, it's part of being human, struggling with faith and asking God for things. You know, because in the back of your mind, you know, the world gets to you a little bit. You're like, yeah, I'm asking God, but I don't know, man. Is He really going to do this for me? Yeah, it doesn't make sense. He wouldn't do this. Why do I disbelieve? Why don't I believe that God will do that? I mean, it tells me that God will give to all generously if they ask in faith. But don't ask if you're not going to ask in faith. It's clear about that. So, I mean, maybe that's a life lesson. Maybe that's a sermon or a Bible study we need to do one day, just, you know, for encouragement among each other, you know, amongst ourselves, is if you're going to ask, if you're going to pray in faith. So, any comments? Feel free to I mean, I've been rambling, getting long-winded up here. I'm sorry.
The second half of verse 6, but let him ask in faith with no doubt.
No doubts, yep.
For he who doubts is like a wave of the sea driven and tossed by the wind.
Yeah.
I'm going to apply this to myself. You were talking about your hopes for the church here and everything. I struggle with, in my whole life, with, you know, doubts on worldly things, whatever. It's just a battle.
Mm.
I'm worried about it. I'm worried about us here. I know I'm not doing enough myself. There's always room for improvement, but not having doubts is key. And that's all I had.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's kind of what I was alluding to. When I pray, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm like, can't do that. Can't do that. It has to be all or nothing, you know. And, yeah, no, I agree wholeheartedly.
So let's talk about this a little bit more, because you said that it has the potential to open up. So is this talking about us as individuals, we go through a situation, we doubt how we handled it? Or is it specifically talking about how we approach God?
In my situation, I'm thinking about how I approach God. I'm not coming in the right manner.
I would agree.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes we get a little bit hard on ourselves, right? Because we're going through life in a world that is not friendly to Christians. Let's just be honest. right? And you're going to go through things, and you're gonna second guess yourself. Like, well, did I do that correctly? Should I have done that? Was that the way the Christian would do it? That to me is, you talk about wisdom, right? One thing you cannot gain is wisdom if you never try to get knowledge.
Yeah.
Right? So the way your grandfather got, developed all of his wisdom is he went through a whole lot of things, and he figured out what was the best way to do it. You got to go through things, and you have to fall short, and you have to fail, and you have to break it, and you have to not be able to fix it, and you have to do that, or you're not going to get the wisdom that you need in order to go through life.
Yeah.
Right. So doubting is part of living. It's part of being a Christian. But the thing that we have to be able to separate is knowing that there is someone that we can talk to and that we can ask of things. And as long as it's according to what his plans are, he will give it to you. That's the separation, right? And it's one of those things where we get kind of down on our life living and try to join that into the spiritual living.
Yeah.
We should not do that.
Yeah. You have to keep it separated. It's kind of like the whole job and work thing. Don't bring your problems to work, things like that. Yeah, it's tough, and you learn best, and I think you alluded to it, a lot of times you learn best or you gain wisdom by falling on your face, and you realize, hey, it's got to be a better way to do it, trial and error, just life in general, living life, you can either gain wisdom or you can just keep going back to doing the same thing that never worked the last time you tried it and keep trying to do it, I'm guilty of that a lot too. So, but yeah, the verse talks about being tossed to and fro, like in a storm, when we did a sermon a couple of weeks ago on Mark 4, that's kind of you can draw a parallel to that text. I mean, look at Mark 4, the storm on the Sea of Galilee, and who's in the boat with Jesus? It's his disciples, and they're flipping out, and you can be so close to God and be so far away, at the same time.
I was going to say, when I was younger, I still kept up with my prayers. Initially, when I first started doing them, of course, I had a lot of faith, and I put a lot of effort into really just trying to connect with the Lord and, talk to Him in the way that I could. As time went on, it felt like my prayers were becoming robotic, and I noticed that.
Yeah.
And I wished that they weren't. And I felt like I was going through the motions, and I wasn't actually praying. I was just hoping for the best for my family.
Yeah. Yeah, and we've talked a lot about that, at times, and you see it in the church sometimes. People, I think Becky was saying they had one of the members here, same prayer every week, and they just kind of tuned it out after a while. And that's always a danger, in your personal life too, is, you pray for what you need and what you want and have faith. When it becomes robotic, then maybe you've got a problem, maybe you're not approaching it with the attitude that you should. But anyway, yeah, a lot more to go through in the first chapter. We didn't even get through it all. I knew we wouldn't. It's always great when we discuss stuff and toss things around. So we'll leave it at that. I guess finish chapter 1. Then if you guys want to do anything else, we can, or just keep going through James.